And presidential candidate of the People's Democratic Party, Atiku Abubakar, has arrived in Kano State. Atiku is in the state to welcome former Kano State Governor, Senator Ibrahim Shekarau, back to the PDP. The former vice president posted pictures of his arrival in Kano on social media, saying, and I quote, "I just touched down at the center of commerce, Kano State. The next few days are set to be very productive." Okay, let's talk more on these issues as we're being joined in the studios by a RISE analyst. Well, Frank Tietie is in the Overflow studio, while Kolawole Johnson, public affairs analyst, is right here with us. Gentlemen, very warm welcome to Newsnight. And let me start with you, Kolawole. The visit by former President Olusegun Obasanjo, how instructive would you describe it? Some people are saying the triumvirate are gathering again to choose who is going to be Nigeria's leader come 2023. But Obasanjo has said categorically that he does not have any preferred candidate, but he's concerned about the leadership issue.
Of course, you don't expect the former president to declare an open support at this stage. However, if he has a national agenda, and since this is a political era, and the national agenda cannot be carried out in a farm, it has to be within the political space. And there is no political space now that can be more defined than the presidential space. And since whatever agenda he is having must be centered around at least a candidate. So at the end of the day, it will still come to support for a candidate. Now, do not also forget that political sociologists would always say that some people would make personal agenda looks like national agenda. But there are statements that actually define national agenda in the interest of the larger majority of the people. So let's hope that the visit it's to the best interest of Nigeria. And I think OBJ is one person that you can't really cast some passion on without noting the fact that he loves this country. So let's hope that it will be for the best interest of the country and the larger majority of the people.
Right. Well, best interest of the larger majority is what Johnson is saying. But let's go to Oversight Studio. Well, Frank Tietie, you have heard our guest in the studio, but I want to get your take really on the former president saying he has no preferred candidate. And of course, this is coming at the back of the fact that he was in London visiting with the Rivers State Governor Nyesom Wike alongside the Labour Party presidential candidate. So would you say that statement of his is a political statement, so that way the wolves don't descend on his preferred candidate? Or would you actually believe what he says, where he says, you know what, it's about national interest and not necessarily me preferring one candidate over the other?
Oh, well, thank you. There is no doubt that the sympathies of Olusegun Obasanjo, former president of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, at this moment are for a certain candidate, most likely Peter Obi of the Labour Party. There's no doubt about that. Pictures and social media to that extent have proven that his sympathies are for him. But you can't take it away from Obasanjo, along with his civil war heroes, Ibrahim Babangida and Abdulsalami Abubakar, all former heads of state in this country, that they actually love this country. They want some measure of stability. And I think that Obasanjo should be commended for taking his level of responsibility to the extent of actually soliciting the cooperation of his former colleagues, both in the army and as heads of state. So no doubt that this is for the national interest. And Obasanjo too has not hidden his animosities against Atiku Abubakar. Even when he tried to cover them up, it was manifest that Obasanjo is not comfortable with Atiku Abubakar. And there is this thing about Igbo presidency, and which Peter Obi represents. And Obasanjo being a civil war hero to the extent that he fought for the unity of this country, along with Ibrahim Babangida. I was at the IBB Presidential Library launch at Abuja, lecture at Abuja, and extolling the virtues of former military president Ibrahim Babangida as someone who actually did so much to unite this country. So these fellows, including Abdul Salami Abubakar, who worked so hard to ensure that there was a military transition to civil rule, to which Chief Olusegun Obasanjo was a beneficiary. So whatever they do, whether they are interested in a particular candidate, Obasanjo clearly for Peter Obi, I believe is in the interest of this country. There's no doubt about that.
All right, no doubt about that. Let's come back to you, Kolawole Johnson. I mean, INEC has ruled out its do's and don'ts, particularly during, excuse me, the electioneering campaign period, which opened September 28. Don't campaign in mosques and churches. Don't bring masquerades to rallies, and public government offices or spaces are not to be used. Tell us more about this. Would that help, bring out real subjects of issues to be discussed, to tell Nigerians, to sell to Nigerians when campaign eventually opens?
Of course, the reason why you have campaign is so that parties present their manifestos, their directions, their programs, so that the people can choose, if those programs would act, would better their life at the end of the day. But you can't take other, side bees away from the political, time, and this would not be different. Of course, there can be rules; they can set those rules, but you can't completely take away those vibes, And you have cultural outplays in each environment, and if masquerade plays, a major part in some people's culture, you may not be able to take it away completely from their campaign. And when it comes to the churches and the mosque, of course, in any political society, you have the social structure and the political structure. And each time the social structure will always influence the political structure. And the churches, the mosque, they are part of the social structure. And of course, if you look at what happened in Kenya, the candidate that won was, targeted the church specifically, and, was going to churches, even donating, and that affected his own campaign too. And, you've seen that twist in the Nigeria space that, some candidates are also taking the battle to this spaces. Why? Because, these gatherings, you have people that some would describe as close audience, and the more you have them, the better for you. Regardless of the warning, you may not be able to separate the social structure, from the political structure in any society. However, it is also good when we don't, bring the churches, bring our, centers of maybe religious activities into the center of our campaign. Of course, regardless, you can separate these factors from the game. However, we shouldn't build the game around it so much that we will corrupt it enough that it will no longer serve its purpose. So INEC is right. We should play it, safe at some point.
While we're playing it safe, we have to look at the legal aspect of it, and let's bring in Barrister Frank Tietie. Well, INEC is very specific about, some areas as it concerns campaigns, as we look forward to the 28th of September when the campaigns kick off. But the one that seemed to get a lot of attention is religious houses. What exactly is wrong with campaigns in religious houses, looking at the legal perspective of it?
Well, initially, they thought that the position on campaign in places of worship, or the use of masquerades, or without the use of masquerade, the thoughts of Festus Okoye, INEC National Commissioner, or the positions of INEC. No, that's not the position. These are the provisions. These are according to the provisions of Section 92 of the Electoral Act of 2022. Festus Okoye did mention that in his statement. However, distinctions need to be made because Section 92 actually refers to a candidate, an aspirant, or a political party. Those are the persons who are responsible for ensuring that they don't, push any masquerade to represent any political ideology or go to any place of worship, whether church or or mosque. However, pastors or imams can actually can have political engagements in the places of worship in line with Section 39 of the Constitution, that is the freedom to express and the freedom to hold opinion. So nobody can stop that. So, but for candidates or for aspirants and political parties, they are barred by the law, not by Festus Okoye or the position of INEC from using masquerades, because actually there is a rationale for that. Imagine a situation where a community that holds a masquerade very dear because the masquerades are representation of the gods, and then the gods are now being politicized. Imagine in the particular community, a god is being polarized for APC or PDP. It not only makes mockery of things that are sacrosanct, but it's dangerous. It can bring a lot of disaffection in the communities. The same thing applies in places of worship. However, people can actually have political discussions in places of worship. After all, they are neither aspirants, candidates, nor political parties. That's why you can have 1 million man march before the actual declaration or lifting of the ban on political campaigns. People can hold opinions. It doesn't stop Peter Obi, Atiku Abubakar, or Kwankwaso, or Bola Ahmed Tinubu from attending an NBA conference in Lagos to make declarations, political statements. That the person with that responsibility becomes the host and not the candidates or the aspirants or political parties.
All right, thanks very much. Nice place to, drop the anchor there. We'll go on a short break, and when we return, the conversation will continue. Stay with us.
I just want flex, don't need stress in my life. Avoid the yawa, I no want queue for the bank. Sharp, I don't open an account. Digital bank, we get the power, now vote. I pay my bills easily, I'm running things like a boss. Collect a loan with no collateral. Vault is the way. Vault is the answer. From Polaris Bank. Vault is the answer. Vault is the way.
Take control. Download Vault by Polaris Bank. That's VULTE. Visit the Google Play Store or Apple Store now. Vault is available to Polaris and non-Polaris Bank customers. Vault by Polaris Bank.
We started our journey over 7 years ago, connecting travelers to their favorite destinations. Since then, we've revolutionized how we want our passengers to feel while flying. That is why we've introduced our brand new Embraer 195E2 aircraft.
Everyone has a face they need to see.
We are on a mission to add new destinations to our ever-increasing fleet. Our Boeing 777 will take you on an international journey. Mumbai, Guangzhou, London, Johannesburg. And now, Airpeace is adding a new destination, Dubai.
If you're gonna fly, then you should fly with us on Airpeace.
Airpeace flies you from all our domestic routes to Dubai from Lagos at no additional cost.
On Airpeace.
Welcome back. You're still watching Newsnight here on Arise News. Well, of course, let's bring back our analyst in the studio. Frank Tietie is in our offsite studio. And of course, Kolawole Johnson, a public affairs analyst, is still here. Gentlemen, you know, Frank Tietie, let me come to you real quick right now. It was an interesting week, you must agree. Consultations galore from Lagos to Port Harcourt to London and now to Kano. What do you make of all that we saw during the course of the week, especially as it concerns the two leading parties in the country?
Oh, well, actual campaigns have begun. Horse trading, reaching out to political blocs have actually been made a very strong thrust in the last 1 week. Don't forget that there are still some very influential force, or I would say forces, in the personalities of Ibrahim Babangida, Abdul Salami, Abubakar, who are personalities that are highly respected in northern Nigeria, where votes can actually be made in collective terms. So Obasanjo reaching out to these two former presidents actually matters a lot. And then you can't take away from the political heavyweight in the person of Shekarau, who is now moving from APC to PDP. So the last, this foregoing week is something to be reckoned with, because what has actually happened will impact much of these voting blocks, especially in northern Nigeria. Obasanjo visiting IBB and Abdul Salami is a very important move, in the sense that convincing those two past leaders of his view with regards to what is better for Nigeria is important. And we haven't heard what their responses are. If it is agreeing with Obasanjo, then we may be expecting something very dramatic as the elections approach. However, PDP and APC at this moment are still are the parties that actually dominated the intrigues. Given the fact that meetings held in London, Wike as a personality is still raising a lot of intrigues, causing a lot of anxieties in both PDP and APC, to the extent that he's been threatened to be sanctioned for anti-party activities. What has happened in this week is actually a serious defining moment for what is to come as the campaigns open.
Yeah, and I'm going to ask Kolawole if this defining moment, is it going to be in Kano that moment is going to be defined for any of the candidates, particularly Atiku Abubakar, the presidential candidate of the PDP, and Rabiu Kwakwanso of the NNPP. Kano, we know, is a powerhouse politically in the north and in the country generally. Kolawole, what are your thoughts here?
Well, tough. One, if you look at the states with the highest number of registered voters, Kano occupied the second position. You know, Lagos is first, 7.1 million, then Kano maybe 6.0, 6.02 or thereabout. However, when it comes to voters turnout, Kano always takes the lead in the country. And you can tell by what they have contributed, maybe especially to the APC in the last two elections, 2015 and 19. You know, in the northwest zone where you have Kano, that particular zone has contributed, I think, about 6 million plus votes to APC back to back. So, and Kano has played a major role there, and it's becoming a semi-battleground. And these two individuals, or the three of them, they have defined the politics of Kano in the last, maybe in this present dispensation from 1999. Kwakwanso, started, but he was in PDP then. While Shekarau, of course, the principal, later came to ANPP. They have never been together for once. However, there is always an interplay there. When he was in ANPP 2003, there was this Buhari factor that helped him. So you may not be able to measure them in terms of the national election equally. In 2015 also, Kwakwanso also got helped by the Buhari's factor. So in 2019, when Shekarau was in APC and Kwakwanso in PDP, something happened. In the national election, of course, they beat Kwakwanso almost silly. But when it came to the state election, you saw what actually happened. Despite the combined forces of Shekarau and Ganduje, Kwakwanso nearly defeated them. Now that, the forces have been shared into three, Kwakwanso, one side, Shekarau on that side. Then you have Ganduji on this side. So these two forces have been shared into three. And I think going forward, it will not just be about the three of them alone. Many other factors, external factors beyond the internal, factors will contribute to what happens in that Kano election. However, the Northwest zone that APC is relying on heavily, I think they may be overrating what they can get if nothing is done. Because take, for example, if you check the 5 top leading states with voters registration in the country, Northwest has like 5. You have Kano, you have Kaduna, and Katsina. And PDP is making serious encroachment into this state. Go and check the record of the last local government election held in Katsina. I think PDP made, serious showing on the ground. Forget what is on the paper. And if you check Kaduna also now, I think PDP is making serious incursion too. So if this continues, I think it may be some defining moment too, but it can't be the final defining moment. We should be looking at the next, weeks, to see it. But do not, underestimate Labour Party. What the party is like, is likely to do in that election, especially if they continue with this momentum, because the momentum is being driven by a certain demography with the highest, number of registered voters to pull the things.
Of
course, the youth. And so
over 80 million.
So you can't push away anyone.
Right. And Barrister Frank Tietie, let's come to you. Of course, Shekarau we cannot ignore. He just left the APC, a party he's been a part of since 2018, just in May of this year. But you know what? Time is not our friend. But I want to look at the significance of this meeting with Atiku Abubakar, and married out with the fact that, as it stands right now, the PDP presidential candidate is yet to inaugurate his campaign cancelled. Yes, some would say it's due to the infightings within the party, and of course the call for IU, the chairman of the party, to step aside, and some are even favoring the likes of Mimiko to take over from him, and maybe even Bukola Saraki has been mentioned as the one who should lead the campaign council. But at the end of the day, all of this infightings in political parties, let's take a look at its implications as we look forward to the 2023 elections.
Very, very far-reaching implications. President Goodluck Jonathan, with the incumbential powers of a ruling party, of a sitting president and the ruling party of the PDP, lost election because of infighting in the PDP. And to think the PDP is this much in a disarray, with a very strong political figure that cannot be easily wished away, with right now wielding the power of a nuisance. I'm talking about the governor of Rivers State. It's going to be very dire for the PDP. Right now is actually whittling away, wasting much of the resources of the PDP in trying to quench a fire that was needless. That's the reason why it is clearly a distraction to Atiku Abubakar right now, that is unable to put up to a campaign council. So it's good that Shekarau is a big catch for Atiku Abubakar in Kano State. But like my colleague over there said, this might just play in the favor of the Labour Party, that is struggling very hard to make inroads in places like Kano, where obviously it doesn't have much ground except for a certain extraction of persons that are sympathetic to it. So when you have these political forces fighting, a third force, a third party like the Labour Party may just be a beneficiary. But come back to INEC. In a situation where people, they claim certain demography in favor of young people or in favor of women, but nobody is really questioning, like the case that is currently before the Federal High Court, asking INEC to allow persons who have registered to vote without PVCs in expectation of the Nigerian factor will make it difficult for people to actually have PVC before the election, which is a very strong possibility. So until there is a lot of certainty that persons who have indeed registered, as the demographics, as the indices and data show, that they are in the majority, they might just be an offset for a coming party like the Labour Party. So it's important that INEC addresses that before it deals with issues of masquerades and people were talking about politics in places of worship.
Thank you so very much, Barrister Frank Tietie. I think all Nigerians just hope that INEC will do the needful, all stakeholders will do the needful come 2023 general elections. Frank Tietie in our offside studio is a lawyer and a RISE analyst. Thanks very much for coming. And Kolawole Johnson, a public affairs analyst. Thanks also for being part of this.